Avery Callahan, 32, stared at the empty display cabinet in her parents' living room where her grandmother's vintage jewelry collection had sat for decades. The collection she'd been promised since childhood, the one her parents had just given to her younger sister Brianna instead. "You're already so successful, Avery. You don't need it like she does," her mother had said dismissively. That moment shattered 20 years of trust and revealed a painful truth in her family's eyes. Her hard work wasn't something to reward, it was something to punish. Hey everyone, before I dive deeper into this family drama that turned my world upside down, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community where we share these real-life stories. I never thought I'd be sharing my own family revenge drama, but sometimes the most important lessons come from the most painful experiences. Now, let's get into how everything unfolded. The promise had been made on my 16th birthday, a warm summer evening that still felt vivid in my memory. Grandmother Eleanor had taken me aside after dinner, her fingers adorned with the antique rings that had fascinated me since childhood. The jewelry collection wasn't just beautiful, it represented our family's history, passed down through 4 generations of women. "One day, Avery, these will be yours," Grandmother had whispered, her eyes twinkling as she opened the ornate wooden box containing her treasures. "I see myself in you, the same determination, the same appreciation for beautiful things with stories behind them." My parents had witnessed this exchange, nodding their approval. Mom had even added Eleanor's right. "You've always been the one who appreciated these pieces the most." Dad had patted my shoulder proudly, saying, "Something special for our special girl who works so hard." For years afterward, whenever I visited my parents' home, I would spend time admiring the collection displayed in their living room cabinet. The Victorian-era emerald necklace that my great-great-grandmother had worn to opera performances, the Art Deco diamond and sapphire bracelet that had been a gift from my great-grandfather after returning from war, the pearl earrings that had been worn by every woman in our family on their wedding day. I'd even researched proper jewelry preservation methods and had purchased special storage containers in anticipation of eventually caring for the collection myself. My sister Brianna, 4 years younger, had never shown much interest in the heirlooms. While I would carefully examine each piece and ask Grandmother about its history before she passed away 5 years ago, Brianna would barely glance at the cabinet. Her interests lay elsewhere, in fast fashion temporary trends and the newest shiny objects that caught her attention. After graduating college, I'd thrown myself into building my career as an architectural historian, specializing in historical preservation. The work was demanding, requiring long hours and frequent travel, but deeply fulfilling. I'd purchased a small but charming craftsman bungalow in a historic district, carefully restoring its original features while updating the essentials. My life was busy but purposeful, centered around preserving beautiful things from the past, much like I planned to do with Grandmother Eleanor's jewelry collection. Brianna had taken a different path. After dropping out of college twice, she'd moved between various retail jobs, apartment shares, and romantic relationships, never quite finding her footing. Our parents had bailed her out of financial troubles repeatedly, always with the explanation that Brianna just needs a little more time to figure things out. I never begrudged their support of her family should help each other, but I couldn't help noticing the pattern of her choices, leading to predictable consequences, followed by parental rescue missions. Last Christmas, during a family dinner, Mom had casually mentioned that I should come by soon to collect Grandmother's jewelry. "Now that you've finally settled in your house, it's time we transferred the collection to you, just like Eleanor wanted," she'd said. I had smiled, feeling that warm glow of connection to my grandmother and our shared appreciation for history and craftsmanship. I had scheduled this weekend visit specifically to collect the heirlooms. But when I arrived at my parents' home, something felt immediately off. Mom seemed nervous, Dad unusually quiet. And now, standing before the empty cabinet, the hollow feeling in my stomach warned me that something was very wrong, something that would forever change my understanding of family loyalty and what it means to be valued for who you are rather than what you need. "Where is grandmother's jewelry collection?" I asked, my voice echoing in the suddenly silent living room. The question hung in the air as my mother busied herself straightening magazines on the coffee table, avoiding eye contact. My father cleared his throat. "Avery, honey, we need to talk about that." The way he said it, with that particular tone parents use when they're about to deliver disappointing news, made my stomach tighten. I sank onto the familiar floral couch, the one where grandmother Eleanor had sat with me countless times telling stories about each precious piece in her collection. "We decided to give Eleanor's jewelry to Brianna," Mom finally said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "She needs it more than you do." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. "What do you mean? That collection was promised to me," grandmother specifically said. "We know what Eleanor said," Dad interrupted, his tone defensive. "But circumstances change. Brianna's struggling right now. You've seen her apartment, her car breaking down every other month. The collection has significant monetary value that could help her get back on her feet." I felt like I'd been slapped. "So you're punishing me for being responsible, for working hard and building a stable life?" Mom's expression hardened in a way I rarely saw. "Don't be dramatic, Avery. We're not punishing you. You're already so successful. You have a beautiful home, a thriving career. You don't need the jewelry like Brianna does." "This isn't about need," I said, my voice shaking. "This is about a promise. About honoring grandmother's wishes." "Eleanor would understand," Dad insisted. "Family takes care of each other. Brianna needs help right now." "And what about me?" I asked. "Doesn't my relationship with grandmother matter? Doesn't the fact that I'm the one who shared her love for these pieces count for anything?" Mom sighed dramatically. "Honestly, Avery, sometimes you can be so selfish. Not everything is about you. Your sister is barely making rent while you're renovating that fancy house of yours. You should be happy to see her get a break for once." The accusation of selfishness hit like a physical blow. Throughout my life, I'd been the responsible one, the one who rarely asked for help, who worked multiple jobs through college to avoid student loans, who waited to buy a home until I could afford it. I'd never begrudged the extra attention and resources my parents directed toward Brianna. But this felt different, a betrayal not just of me, but of grandmother Eleanor's explicit wishes. "When did you give her the collection?" I asked quietly. My parents exchanged glances. "Last week," Dad admitted. "She's already taken some pieces to that jewelry appraiser on Main Street." My blood ran cold. "She's selling them already. She needs the money," Mom said defensively. "And it's hers to do with as she pleases now." I thought of the emerald necklace that had survived 2 world wars, the delicate cameo brooch that had been a wedding gift in 1893, the pearl earrings worn by generations of women in our family on their most important days. Pieces that told our family's story, now being evaluated for their monetary value by a stranger. "Did you even try to explain the historical and sentimental value to her?" I asked. "Of course we did," Dad said, though his eyes slid away from mine. "But at the end of the day, Brianna has to make her own decisions." The hypocrisy was stunning. When it came to giving away something promised to me, they could override grandmother's wishes without hesitation. But when it came to setting conditions on how Brianna should treat these irreplaceable family treasures, suddenly they were champions of autonomy and personal choice. "I think I should go," I said, standing up. My legs felt unsteady beneath me. "Don't be like this," Avery, Mom pleaded, finally looking concerned. "We're still family." We just had to make a difficult decision. But as I walked out to my car, something had fundamentally shifted. The foundation I thought was solid, the understanding of my place in this family, the value of my hard work and responsibility, the meaning of promises made, had cracked irreparably. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be quite the same again. 3 days after the revelation at my parents' house, I still couldn't shake the hollow feeling in my chest. I'd called in sick to work for the first time in years, spending my days alternating between angry tears and stunned disbelief. The betrayal felt physical, like a constant weight pressing against my lungs. On the fourth morning, I woke with sudden clarity. I needed to speak with Brianna directly. Perhaps she didn't fully understand what had happened, or maybe our parents had presented the situation differently to her. Despite our differences, we'd never had serious conflict growing up. Surely she would understand why this mattered so much to me. I called and suggested meeting for coffee. Brianna sounded surprised but agreed readily enough. Sure, the cafe on Maple Street. Around noon, the small trendy cafe was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived. Brianna was already seated at a corner table scrolling through her phone. I noticed immediately that she was wearing grandmother Eleanor's opal ring, the one Eleanor had worn daily for over 40 years. Seeing it on Brianna's finger sent a fresh wave of pain through me. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." Brianna glanced up, offering a quick smile. "No problem. I've been meaning to call you anyway. Mom said you were upset about the jewelry." The casual way she referenced it, the jewelry, not grandmother's collection or the family heirlooms, told me everything I needed to know about how differently we viewed these treasures. "Upset doesn't begin to cover it," I said carefully. "Brianna, that collection was promised to me. Grandmother explicitly said she wanted me to have it." She shrugged, twisting the opal ring on her finger. "That was years ago, Avery. Things change. Mom and Dad thought I could use the help more now." "It wasn't theirs to give," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "And it's not just about monetary value. These pieces have historical significance, family history." "Oh, I know all about your obsession with old things," Brianna interrupted with a dismissive wave. "But let's be real, you don't need this stuff. Look at your life compared to mine. You've always had everything figured out. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect house. Meanwhile, I'm barely staying afloat." "I worked for everything I have," I said, feeling heat rise to my face. "Nothing was handed to me." "Except the natural ability to succeed at everything," she shot back. "Some of us have to struggle more, you know. Not everyone can be Avery the Amazing." The bitterness in her voice surprised me. Had she always resented me this much? "This isn't about competition between us," I tried. "It's about respecting grandmother's wishes. About family history." Brianna leaned forward. "You want to talk about family. How about being there for someone who needs help? Mom and Dad are just trying to level the playing field a little. By breaking a promise to me, by disregarding what grandmother wanted." "Grandmother's gone," Brianna said bluntly. "And I'm here trying to make a life for myself without all the advantages you've had." "What advantages?" I asked, genuinely confused. "We grew up in the same house, with the same parents, the same opportunities." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sure, on paper. But you were always the golden child, smart, responsible Avery, who never gave them a moment's worry. Do you have any idea what it's like living in that shadow? Having teachers say, 'Oh, you're Avery's sister. We expect great things from you too.'" I sat back, taken aback by the resentment pouring out of her. "I had no idea you felt that way." "Of course you didn't. You were too busy being perfect." She twisted the opal ring again. "Anyway, I've already sold some of the pieces. The emerald necklace and that old cameo thing." My heart sank. "You sold the Victorian emeralds and the cameo from 1893, Brianna. Those pieces were irreplaceable. They were just old jewelry." She cut me off. "Now they're helping me pay off my credit cards and put a deposit on a better apartment. Isn't that more important than keeping them in some display case?" I stared at her, suddenly seeing my sister as if for the first time. The emotional gulf between us was far wider than I'd ever realized. We weren't just different people with different priorities, we lived in entirely different moral universes. What about the pearl earrings? I asked quietly. The ones every woman in our family has worn on their wedding day since 1920. Something flickered across Brianna's face, uncertainty, perhaps even guilt. I haven't sold those. Do. Yet. Would you consider letting me have just those? As a compromise, she hesitated, then hardened again. I can't. I need everything I can get right now. Maybe when you get married, you can borrow them. The condescension in her tone, as if she was doing me a favor by offering to let me borrow the earrings that should have been mine, was the final straw. You know what, Brianna? Keep the jewelry. Sell it all. But understand what you're really selling, not just gold and gems, but our family's history. Pieces that survived wars and depressions, that were cherished and preserved by women who wanted future generations to have that connection to the past. Once they're gone, that connection is broken forever. I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. And for what it's worth, I never saw you as living in my shadow. I was always proud to be your sister. As I walked away, I heard her call after me, but I didn't turn around. The betrayal had crystallized into something harder now, a clear-eyed understanding that some broken things can't be repaired, some lost treasures can't be replaced. And sometimes the people who should value you the most are the ones least capable of seeing your true worth. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and emotional numbness. I threw myself into a major historical preservation project, spending long hours documenting architectural features of an 1,882 courthouse scheduled for renovation. The methodical work was soothing, cataloging details, researching original materials, ensuring that history would be properly preserved despite necessary modernizations. If only family relationships could be restored with the same careful attention to original intent, I thought bitterly one evening as I sorted through old photographs of the courthouse's construction. It was during this period that I received an unexpected email from Margaret Chen, an elderly neighbor of my parents whom I'd always been fond of. The subject line read simply, "Something you should know about your grandmother's wishes." Dear Avery, I hope this message finds you well, though I suspect from what I've observed recently that might not be the case. I'm writing because I've become aware of a situation regarding Eleanor's jewelry collection that troubles me deeply. Your grandmother was my dearest friend for over 40 years, as you know. What you may not know is that shortly before her passing, Eleanor asked me to witness as she added a codicil to her will, specifically regarding her jewelry collection. She was absolutely adamant that these pieces should go to you, the granddaughter who shared her passion for history and preservation. I recently learned from casual conversation with your mother that the collection has been given to Brianna instead. This directly contradicts Eleanor's legally documented wishes, and I felt you should be aware. I have a copy of the codicil that Eleanor gave me, just in case, as she put it. I would be happy to share it with you if you'd like to come by my house this weekend. With care, Margaret Chen, I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking. Grandmother had actually put her wishes in writing, legally binding writing, and my parents had ignored it completely. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal now. It was potentially a legal one as well. I called Margaret immediately and arranged to visit her that Saturday. Her home was as I remembered it, filled with books and artwork from her travels as a former professor of anthropology. She welcomed me with a warm hug that nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. "My dear girl, I'm so sorry about all this," she said, leading me to her living room. "Eleanor would be furious if she knew." "I still can't believe they would go against her explicit wishes," I said, accepting the tea she offered. "Especially if it was in a legal document." Margaret nodded gravely. "Your grandmother was wise about people even though she loved." She told me once that she worried about how Brianna was being raised too many rescues, not enough consequences. And she said something else I've never forgotten. Margaret, sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness and responsibility for indestructibility. My Avery is strong, but she deserves protection too. Tears welled in my eyes at hearing grandmother's words. She had seen me, really seen me, in a way my own parents never seemed to. Margaret retrieved a folder from her desk and handed me several documents. The codicil is quite clear. The entire jewelry collection was to pass directly to you upon Eleanor's death. Your parents were merely holding it in trust until you had a secure place to keep it. I scanned the papers, noting grandmother's familiar signature alongside a notary stamp and Margaret's signature as witness. The language was unambiguous. My entire collection of jewelry, including all pieces listed in the attached inventory, shall pass to my granddaughter Avery Callahan. There's something else, Margaret said hesitantly. Something Eleanor added that I think you should see. She pointed to a paragraph near the end of the document. If for any reason my daughter and son-in-law attempt to override this bequest and direct these items to another recipient, I have left instructions with my attorney to release funds from a separate trust for Avery's use in legal proceedings should she choose to pursue them. Additionally, in such circumstances, Avery is to be given the sealed letter in my attorney's possession, which explains my reasoning and contains information I have never shared with my daughter. I looked up at Margaret stunned. She anticipated this might happen. Margaret sighed. Eleanor loved all her family, but she had no illusions about them. She saw patterns of behavior over decades that concerned her. This was her way of ensuring her wishes would be respected and that you would have recourse if they weren't. Do you know what information is in the sealed letter? I asked. She never told me specifically, Margaret replied, but I know it relates to some family history that she felt her daughter, your mother, had misrepresented for years. Eleanor believed in facing truth, however uncomfortable. I sat back feeling overwhelmed. I never wanted legal action against my own family, Margaret. I just wanted them to respect grandmother's wishes and mine. I understand, she said gently. But Eleanor put these safeguards in place for a reason. She valued that collection not just for its monetary worth, but for the family stories it contained. Stories she specifically wanted preserved through you. As I gathered the documents to leave, Margaret pressed something small and hard into my palm. I opened my hand to find a beautiful antique key on a delicate gold chain. Eleanor gave this to me for safekeeping, Margaret explained. It opens a small lockbox in her attorney's office that contains additional pieces, the most valuable ones, historically speaking, that she kept separate from the main collection. She said these pieces were for Avery's eyes only. I was to give it to you after the main collection was transferred, but under the circumstances. I closed my fingers around the key, feeling its weight, the weight of my grandmother's trust and foresight. Thank you, Margaret, for everything. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. I now had legal grounds to challenge my parents' actions and reclaim at least some of grandmother's collection before Brianna sold everything. But such action would permanently alter my relationship with my family. Was I prepared for that consequence, and what secrets did that sealed letter contain? What had my mother misrepresented about our family history that grandmother felt was important enough to document formally, for the first time since discovering the empty display cabinet? I felt something beyond hurt and betrayal. I felt a sense of purpose, of responsibility to my grandmother's memory and wishes, and beneath it all, a growing curiosity about what truths had been hidden beneath the surface of our family story all these years. You know, stories like mine make me wonder how many of you have experienced family betrayal that made you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. As my grandmother Eleanor used to say, the truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how hard people try to keep it down. If you're finding this journey with me compelling so far, please hit that like button to help more people find this story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect moment. You won't want to miss what happens next when I reveal what was in that mysterious sealed letter. Let's continue. The office of Winterstone and Associates occupied the entire top floor of one of the oldest buildings in town, a fitting location for an estate law firm that had served local families for generations. The receptionist, a dignified woman with silver-streaked hair, nodded in recognition when I gave my name. "Miss Callahan, Mr. Winterstone is expecting you." She led me through a hallway lined with discreetly framed credentials and into a corner office with windows overlooking the town square. Harrison Winterstone rose from behind a substantial mahogany desk, extending his hand. Though well into his 70s, he stood straight-backed and sharp-eyed, exuding the quiet competence that had likely reassured clients for decades. "Avery, it's been some time. You look very much like your grandmother." The unexpected compliment brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you. I understand you have something for me." "Indeed." He gestured to a chair. Margaret Chen called to explain the situation. "Most unfortunate." His understated description of my family's betrayal almost made me smile. "Yes. Unfortunate." Mr. Winterstone opened a drawer and removed a small ornate wooden box. "This contains the items Eleanor entrusted to me along with her letter." He placed it on the desk between us. "I'll give you privacy to review the contents." After he left, I sat staring at the box for several moments. Whatever it contained had been important enough for grandmother to keep separate from her main collection, important enough to conceal from my mother. My fingers trembled slightly as I removed the key Margaret had given me from around my neck and fitted it into the tiny brass lock. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, lay 3 pieces of jewelry I'd never seen before. A striking Art Nouveau pendant featuring a woman's profile in carved moonstone surrounded by tiny diamonds. A heavy gold signet ring engraved with an unfamiliar crest. And a slender platinum and diamond bracelet of extraordinary craftsmanship. Beneath these was a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandmother Eleanor's elegant script. I carefully removed the letter and broke the seal, unfolding several pages covered in my grandmother's handwriting. "My dearest Avery, if you are reading this, then my suspicions have proven correct, and my daughter has chosen to disregard my explicit wishes regarding my jewelry collection. I am deeply sorry for the hurt this has undoubtedly caused you, but perhaps not surprised. Some patterns persist across generations, as you will soon understand. The 3 pieces enclosed with this letter are not merely valuable antiques, they are keys to a family history that has been deliberately obscured. A history I believe you, with your love of truth and preservation, deserve to know. The moonstone pendant belonged to my mother, your great-grandmother Sophia. History records her as the daughter of a prosperous merchant who married well and lived a conventional life. This is the story my father insisted upon, the story your grandfather and mother believe. It is a comfortable fiction. The truth which I discovered among my father's papers after his death is that Sophia was born Sophia Levitsky, the daughter of Russian Jewish immigrants who fled the pogroms in 1905. She changed her name and concealed her heritage to marry into my father's socially prominent but anti-Semitic family. The pendant was a gift from her parents, the only piece of her true heritage she kept hidden away her entire life. The signet ring bears the crest of the Barrett family, not our Barretts, but a family that made its fortune in the triangle trade, trafficking human beings across the Atlantic. When young Charles Barrett fell in love with a woman of mixed race in 1879, his family disowned him. He rejected his inheritance, changed his name to Barnes, and moved west with his bride. That bride was my paternal grandmother. The ring came to me through a distant cousin who discovered our true lineage and felt I should know. The diamond bracelet has perhaps the most painful history of all. It was purchased by your grandfather, my husband James, not for me, but for the woman with whom he conducted a decades-long affair. Upon her death, her son contacted me believing I had given it to his mother. I chose to keep this bracelet as a reminder that appearances and reality can diverge drastically even in the most seemingly stable marriages. I never shared these truths with your mother. She preferred comfortable illusions to complex realities, a trait that manifested early and only strengthened with time. When faced with family secrets during her youth, she chose selective blindness. When confronted with your grandfather's infidelity after his death, she refused to acknowledge the evidence. She has built her identity around a sanitized family narrative that these truths would shatter. You, Avery, have always faced reality squarely. From the time you were a small child asking why the sky is blue, you have sought truth, even uncomfortable truth. This integrity is why I have chosen you as the custodian not only of my jewelry but of our authentic family history, both its moments of courage and its darker chapters. The collection I assembled over my lifetime tells many stories. Some pieces came through traditional inheritance, others I purchased to commemorate significant moments. Each represents a facet of who we are as a family. In your hands, I believe these stories will be honored rather than erased to maintain comfortable fictions. If you choose to use the legal provisions I've established to reclaim the collection, Harrison has all necessary documentation. If you choose instead to let those pieces go and focus only on these three and their stories, I will understand. The choice is yours, as it should be. Whatever you decide, know that I have always seen you clearly, valued your strength without taking it for granted, and loved you for exactly who you are. With all my love and faith in you, Grandmother Eleanor, I read the letter twice more, each revelation landing like a physical blow. The carefully constructed family narrative I'd grown up with, respectable merchants and farmers on one side, New England academics on the other, had significant chapters missing. Chapters that explained so much about the present. My mother's insistence on appearances, her discomfort with any topic that disrupted her preferred version of reality, her dismissal of inconvenient truths, all suddenly made sense in the context of a lifetime spent maintaining comfortable fictions. And her treatment of me and Brianna reflected the pattern Grandmother had observed, rewarding those who participated in these fictions, punishing those who questioned them. I carefully returned the letter to its envelope and examined the three pieces of jewelry again. Unlike the decorative items in the main collection, these pieces carried hidden histories, uncomfortable truths, preserved in precious metals and stones. My grandmother had entrusted me with both the physical objects and the stories behind them, believing I would value authenticity over comfort. As I locked the box and placed the key back around my neck, I made my decision. I would fight for the entire collection not out of spite or even hurt, but because Grandmother Eleanor had been right about the importance of preserving complete stories, not just the convenient parts. Some truths were difficult to face, but erasing them didn't make them disappear. It only ensured that their lessons remained unlearned. Mr. Winterstone returned to find me composed and resolute. I'd like to proceed with reclaiming the collection, I told him. All of it. He nodded unsurprised. Eleanor thought you might. She said you understood that heritage isn't just about the pretty pieces we display proudly, but also about the hidden ones that tell harder truths. As I left his office, I felt the weight of the wooden box in my bag and the heavier weight of the decision I'd made. The path ahead would involve difficult conversations, likely lasting family estrangement, and the pain of bringing hidden truths to light. But some inheritances demanded nothing less than complete honesty, especially those passed down with such clear intention and trust. The certified letter from Winterstone and Associates arrived at my parents' home on a Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, my phone was flooded with missed calls and increasingly frantic text messages. Avery, what is this legal nonsense? Call us immediately. You can't be serious about suing your own family. This is so like you to overreact. We need to talk now. I let them all go to voicemail, taking the time I needed to prepare mentally for what would inevitably be an explosive confrontation. Finally, on Thursday morning, I texted back a simple message: "I'll be at your house Saturday at 2 p.m. We can discuss everything then." The 2 intervening days gave me time to consult with Miss Winterstone about the legal aspects and with Dr. Myers, my therapist, about the emotional ones. I needed to be clear-headed and firm without allowing my parents' inevitable manipulations to derail the conversation. When Saturday arrived, I parked in front of their familiar colonial-style house feeling strangely calm. The storm of emotions that had raged since the initial betrayal had settled into a steady resolve. I wasn't there to punish my parents or even to express my hurt, though both would likely be outcomes. I was there to honor my grandmother's wishes and to stand firm in my own worth. They were waiting in the living room, the tension palpable as soon as I entered. Mom sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa while Dad paced by the fireplace. Brianna was notably absent. "What is the meaning of this?" Dad demanded before I'd even fully entered the room, waving the legal letter. "Suing your own parents? Have you completely lost your mind?" I took a seat in the armchair opposite them, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not suing you. I'm enforcing Grandmother Eleanor's legal will, which you chose to ignore." "That old piece of paper doesn't override our parental decision," Mom said dismissively. "We were just doing what's best for both our daughters." "It's not an old piece of paper. It's a legally binding codicil to Grandmother's will, specifically addressing the jewelry collection." I removed a copy from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. "You were never given the authority to redistribute those items. You were holding them in trust for me." Mom didn't even glance at the document. "This is absurd. Eleanor would never have done something like this behind our backs." "But she did," I said quietly. "Because she knew you might do exactly what you've done." Dad stopped pacing to glare at me. "So you're willing to drag your family through legal proceedings over some old jewelry? Do you have any idea how this will look? How it will affect all of us?" The irony of his concern about appearances wasn't lost on me. "I'm willing to stand up for what's rightfully mine. Grandmother was explicit about her wishes, and you deliberately ignored them." "We made a judgment call as parents," Mom insisted. "Brianna needed help." "This isn't about helping Brianna," I interrupted. "If you wanted to help her financially, you could have done that in countless other ways. This was about punishing me for not needing your help, for building a life that doesn't require your constant intervention." My mother's face flushed. "That's ridiculous. We've always been proud of your success." "Proud but resentful," I countered. "Every time you say, 'I'm too successful to deserve something,' you're revealing that you see achievement as something to penalize, not celebrate. You have no idea how hard it's been watching Brianna struggle while everything comes so easily to you," Dad said, his voice strained. "Nothing came easily to me," I said firmly. "I worked for everything I have. And more importantly, Brianna's struggles don't justify breaking promises to me or disregarding Grandmother's explicit wishes." Mom stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. You've always been self-righteous, Avery, but this is beyond the pale. Threatening legal action against your own family. What would Eleanor say about that?" I smiled slightly. "Actually, I know exactly what she would say, because she provided for this very situation." I removed Grandmother's letter from my bag. "She left me this, to be opened only if you tried to override her wishes regarding the collection." Both my parents stared at the letter, recognition dawning on their faces as they saw the familiar handwriting. "What does it say?" Dad asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. "It explains why she left the collection to me. It also reveals some family history that's been selectively edited over the years." I looked directly at my mother. History about great-grandmother Sophia's true background. About the Barrett family's actual origins. About grandfather James's decades-long affair. The color drained from my mother's face. "Those are lies," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. Eleanor was confused in her final years. "She wasn't confused," I said gently. "She had documentation, photos, letters. The evidence is quite clear. Why would she keep these things secret all these years, only to reveal them now?" Dad demanded, though his righteous anger had deflated considerably. "She didn't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily," I explained. "But she also believed in truth, in facing reality rather than hiding from it. She trusted me to handle these stories with care because I've always valued authenticity over comfortable fictions." My mother sank back onto the sofa, looking suddenly older. "You have no right to dredge up ancient history that has nothing to do with you." "But it does have to do with me," I countered. "It's my heritage too, the complete version, not just the sanitized one. And it explains so much about our family dynamics, about your choices." "What choices?" Dad asked defensively. I took a deep breath. "The choice to reward Brianna for needing rescue while punishing me for self-sufficiency. The choice to break promises when they become inconvenient. The choice to preserve a certain image of our family at all costs, even when that cost is the trust and relationship with your daughter." A heavy silence fell over the room. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, my parents seemed to have no ready defense, no counter-narrative to offer. Finally, my father spoke. "What exactly do you want, Avery?" "I want grandmother's jewelry collection, returned as legally required. All of it." I placed another document on the table. "This is an inventory of every piece prepared by grandmother herself. Mr. Winterstone has advised me that if we cannot resolve this amicably, the next step will be a formal legal demand followed by court proceedings if necessary." "Brianna has already sold several pieces," Mom said weakly. "I'm aware. The emerald necklace and the cameo at minimum. She'll need to provide documentation of the sales, and the proceeds will need to be placed in escrow while we determine fair compensation for the lost items." "This will devastate her," Dad protested. I met his gaze steadily. "Your decision to give her something that wasn't yours to give has created this situation. The consequences aren't my responsibility." "And what about our family?" Mom asked, tears finally appearing in her eyes. "What about our relationship?" The question hung in the air between us. What about our relationship, indeed? The foundation had been cracked long before this confrontation, perhaps even before the jewelry dispute. The patterns grandmother Eleanor had observed, the selective truths, the uneven treatment, all had taken their toll over decades. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "That depends on whether we can build something new based on truth and mutual respect, rather than convenient fictions and conditional love." As I gathered my things to leave, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The path ahead would not be easy, but it would be authentic. And perhaps that was the most valuable inheritance my grandmother had left me, not the jewelry itself, but the courage to insist on honesty even when it disrupted comfortable illusions. "I'll have Mr. Winterstone contact you next week to arrange the transfer of the remaining pieces," I said from the doorway. "I hope for all our sakes that we can resolve this without further legal proceedings." As I walked to my car, I felt lighter somehow despite the heaviness of the situation. Sometimes the truest form of self-preservation isn't avoiding conflict, but standing firmly in your own worth even when those who should value you most have failed to do so. 6 months passed before the dust began to settle. The legal process of recovering grandmother Eleanor's jewelry collection proved as complicated and painful as I had anticipated. Brianna had indeed sold several pieces beyond the emerald necklace and cameo 5 in total, and tracing the buyers required the services of a specialized investigator hired by Mr. Winterstone. 2 pieces were recovered through direct purchase from their new owners at significantly marked up prices. The others had disappeared into the collector market, likely resold multiple times. For these, financial compensation was arranged based on professional appraisals, with the funds coming from the trust grandmother had established for exactly this purpose. The family dynamic had shifted irrevocably. My parents maintained minimal contact, our conversations stiff and formal when necessary. Brianna refused to speak to me entirely, blaming me for ruining her life when she was forced to return the proceeds from the sales and vacate the apartment she'd rented using that money. What surprised me most during this period wasn't the estrangement I had expected, but rather the unexpected connections that formed in its wake. Margaret Chen introduced me to a network of local historians and preservation specialists who shared my passion for authenticating and documenting historical artifacts. Through them, I met Elise Harmon, a jewelry historian specializing in pieces with complex provenance and cultural significance. When I showed Elise the 3 special pieces from grandmother's lockbox and shared their stories, she was fascinated. These aren't just beautiful objects, they're physical embodiments of suppressed narratives. Would you consider allowing me to include them in my upcoming exhibition on hidden histories and heirlooms? The idea of bringing these secret stories into the light appealed to me deeply. I think my grandmother would have approved, I told her. She preserved these truths for a reason. The exhibition opened at the City Museum that fall, featuring not only Grandmother Eleanor's 3 special pieces, but the surviving items from her main collection as well. Each was displayed with detailed provenance information and the personal stories attached to them, including the uncomfortable truths about our family's past that had been concealed for generations. My mother sent a terse email when she discovered the exhibition. "How dare you air our family's private matters in public?" I replied simply that history deserved honesty, not selective editing, and invited her to visit the exhibition. Ill herself, she never responded. What I hadn't expected was the letter that arrived from Brianna 3 weeks after the exhibition opened. Unlike my parents' communications, hers contained no accusations or demands, only a simple request: "Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you." We arranged to meet at a small cafe across town, neutral territory for us both. When she arrived, I barely recognized my sister. Gone was the fashionable clothing and carefully styled hair. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But the most striking change was in her eyes, clearer, somehow more focused than I'd seen them in years. "I saw the exhibition," she said after we'd ordered coffee. "It wasn't what I expected." "In what way?" I asked cautiously. "I thought it would be vindictive. A way to get back at all of us." She stirred her coffee absently. But it wasn't. It was honest in a way our family has never been. I waited, sensing there was more. "The pendant, Sophia Levitsky's pendant," she continued. "That story hit me hard. All those years hiding who she really was to fit someone else's expectations." She looked up at me. "I've been doing that my whole life." "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Playing the role of the struggling one, the one who needs rescuing." At first, it wasn't conscious. It was just easier to let Mom and Dad swoop in than to figure things out myself. But over time, it became an identity. My identity. She paused, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. "A comfortable fiction," like grandmother's letters said. I was stunned by her self-awareness. What changed? When everything fell apart after the legal proceedings, I had no choice but to actually stand on my own. No safety net. And you know what? It was terrifying, but also freeing. She gave a small, rueful smile. "I got a steady job as an administrative assistant at a law firm. Found a modest apartment I can actually afford. Started taking night classes to finish my degree." "That's really great, Brianna," I said, meaning it. I'm not telling you this for validation, she said quickly. I'm telling you because I owe you an apology. Not just for the jewelry, though. I am sorry about that, but for resenting you all these years for being strong when I should have been learning from your example. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. For the first time in our adult lives, my sister was speaking to me without pretense or competition, just honest communication between two people with shared history and very different paths. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her bag. She placed a small velvet box on the table between us. I didn't sell everything. I couldn't bring myself to part with these, even when I needed the money. I opened the box to find Grandmother Eleanor's pearl earrings, the ones traditionally worn by the women in our family on their wedding days. I kept telling myself I was saving them for my future wedding, Brianna explained. But after seeing the exhibition, I realized they were never meant for me. They belong with the rest of the collection. With you. The gesture moved me deeply, not just the return of the precious earrings, but the growth it represented in my sister. Thank you, I said simply. Do you think? Is there any way we might rebuild some kind of relationship? She asked hesitantly. Not pretending the past didn't happen, but moving forward differently. I considered her question carefully. I think that's possible. It would take time and honesty on both sides. Honesty, she repeated with a small smile. That's what the exhibition taught me. There's power in facing the whole truth, even the uncomfortable parts. As we parted that day, I realized that Grandmother Eleanor's true legacy wasn't the jewelry collection itself, beautiful and valuable though it was. Her legacy was the courage to preserve authentic stories, to value truth over comfortable illusions, and to recognize that sometimes what appears to be betrayal can ultimately lead to a more genuine understanding of ourselves and our relationships. The following spring, when the museum asked to extend the exhibition for another 6 months due to its popularity, I agreed with one addition. Beside the pearl earrings, I added a new card with text that Grandmother Eleanor would have appreciated for its honesty. These earrings, worn by generations of women in our family on their wedding days, temporarily left the collection during a period of family conflict. Their return represents not just the preservation of a physical heirloom, but the possibility that even broken family bonds can be rewoven into new patterns when truth replaces comfortable fictions. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what's given to us, but what we discover within ourselves when faced with betrayal. The capacity to stand firm in our worth, to insist on truth, even when it's inconvenient, and to recognize that true success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by the integrity with which we live our stories, complete with all their complex chapters. This journey has taught me that family karma works in unexpected ways. The very betrayal that once felt like punishment for my success ultimately led me to a deeper understanding of my heritage and a more authentic relationship with my sister. Not all broken things can be perfectly restored, but some can be transformed into something new and perhaps more honest than before. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you experienced a family betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth or revelation? Has someone ever used your success as a reason to take something away from you? Drop your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others find these real-life family stories that remind us we're not alone in our struggles. Subscribe for more tales of family dynamics, justice, and healing. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most necessary form of self-preservation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your success should never be used as a weapon against you. It should be celebrated, especially by those who claim to love you most.